Oh, you don't. Okay, we're live on Rob Grant's amazing show. I'm probably wrong about everything, and he isn't. He's pretty right about everything because he's booked me, Gerry Fialka, and Duncan Echelson. We're proud and honored to be here on August 4th, 2021. This is Laughtears number 3, probing suspended judgment. And I thought, Rob, this was a great topic since Duncan is well versed in this, having studied.
Don't go too far.
Yeah, he having studied Eastern philosophies, Chinese and Japanese. And it is something I learned from Marshall McLuhan is that having a point of view is, understanding is not having a point of view. So the first question I'll ask you, Duncan, first is having a point of view more innate or more invented?
Both.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay. Yeah.
just both.
Okay. Rob.
So I'm gonna break that down a little bit, because the more I'm getting into this, I'm realizing the field of etiology. I'm probably not even saying that word right, but breaking things down into how we got there in the first place. So what exactly do you mean by a point of view? Like my perspective on things in the world, or my political, my social political kind of understanding? What does one mean by point of view?
Right. So I'll attempt it, and then Duncan can say. Point of view is having, a specific leaning towards one thing or another. It's like grasping something and saying you're linear about it, and you're more head oriented, and you're going, it's not like your gut is saying I feel this way. It's more like your mind is saying, I prefer chocolate ice cream to vanilla ice cream. So that could be
Right.
your sense of taste, but there's something about it. Oh, chocolate, like, okay, what flavor do you want on your ice cream cone? And then, people usually look, and then they go 33 choices. Okay, I'm going to go with that.
It's almost reflexive.
That's an interesting word, reflexive. It's reactionary, I would say more. It's
right.
Yeah, maybe more reactionary than reflexive. What's the difference? Duncan, you go into it, but Duncan, what's the difference between reflexive and reactionary?
Well, I don't know if I can answer that. But concerning point of view, I can say something about that.
Good.
So we're having the Olympics right now. Okay. No, I don't give a flip. I mean, I'm sorry. I know these people are working hard, and there's a couple of human interest stories that bleed through for me that I like. I think I mentioned one on Facebook the other day. But I'm always amused that this is the Olympics, which is supposedly bringing everybody around the world together. And what's the first thing you see first thing I see when I go through my news feed in the morning? It is how many gold medals the United States has, how many gold medals the Chinese have, on down the list. So it's obvious that to lots of people watching, the important part of the Olympics is, are we winning?
Right.
Are we beating those other nations? Okay. So that's a point of view. There are a few people who rise above that and go, I'm just here to see who the best athlete is and to see if there's anything new happening. That's why I'm here, and I don't really care what nation the winner is from. Okay, but that's a developed point of view. I don't think that I think the natural tendency for people born in a particular country or a particular city or a particular high school is to root for their quotations team. That's a point of view.
Yeah. That was well put. Rob, go ahead.
Well, something was a book I was reading. I don't know. Either it was something you sent me or one of the books that I'm reading, but our goal is one of the goals is to like resist. I think it was actually in this one, Why Buddhism is True by Robin Wright. And which again, to me is kind of like a bit of an absolute statement. Buddhism is true. Anyways, you got to sell it, right? But it's talking about how it seems like there's increased tribalism going on in the world. Now, this is a value judgment, and we'll get there in a second. But how you resist that is through the cultivation of oneself. And in the Tao Te Ching, how do you say that, Duncan? This one?
The Tao Te Ching.
Yeah. There's this verse that I read, and it just stuck out. Is it all right if I read it to you guys real quick?
Read on.
Okay. So there's how this book works is it's the Tao, and then there's like people who try to explain what it is to you, which it doesn't make any sense. It's like the more you think you got it, the less you understand. And it says, those who dwell in substance and abide in fruit are close to the Tao. Those who dwell on the surface and abide in the flower are estranged from the Tao. So they're very similar, but just slight word changes, and you get a completely different outcome. So those who dwell in substance, and abide in fruit are close to the Tao. Those who dwell on the surface versus dwell in the surface, substance. Those who dwell on the surface and abide in the flower are estranged from the Tao. So you're like, man, what does that mean? But it almost kind of connects into suspended judgment, right? Because as a young person, I find myself like when I watch media and news, it's like, Jesus, I should not have any kind of heart thing attached to me. My blood pressure probably goes through the roof, depending on whether I'm watching CNN or Fox News, right? It's these stories that they take from the pages of Joseph Goebbels, who was the media guy for Hitler.
Media guru.
Great explanation. Anyways, but he said that if you appeal to the emotions of the people, you'll win them over. Versus if you tell them the truth, like, hey, we got some serious economic difficulties here. Like instead, they end like in that film, Triumph of the Will, which I didn't understand. It's just a guy yelling at me for 2 hours. But anyways, in that film, it's so provocative in what it's doing in appealing to the emotions. And we look at it now through our perspective and we're like, oh, that's so terrible. But in 1934, when that film came out, if you saw that film, given the zeitgeist of the time, you could easily be mesmerized by it. And that's where I think this suspension of judgment is so critical these days, but it's so incredibly difficult at the same time because our world wants us to be reactionary or reflexive or whatever the proper word is to what's going on. And that's just in my own experiences. I see that I can be like, I don't know if you've ever seen Mike Tyson in interviews, which I love that guy. But if you ask him the right questions, he's a beautiful guy to interview. You ask him the wrong questions, you're going to want to get out of that room as soon as you humanly can. And in my own experiences, I could be so level-headed, right? But then if somebody starts asking me the wrong questions, I just get pissed off. And it's like, which goes into this is how do we become the disciples of suspended judgment in a world that feeds on this?
Now, Rob, you really led up to a great question. See, you really got a podcast going here that's like, look out, Joe Rogan. Rob is taking over because you gave your blurb, but then you fed it right into. Yeah. I'll let Duncan. Do you want to handle it first, Duncan? How do you want to word the question, Rob? How do we cope with information overload?
Yeah. Well, it's easy. It's easy to have suspended judgment when you don't really have skin in the game. You know what I mean? Like it's easy to be like, oh yes, you know, like the Oakland Raiders are a superior, like, because I don't care about that, right? But when it's things that I care about, it's really hard for me to suspend judgment. And then
Okay,
that's when I get evoked.
how do we have suspended judgment in issues we really care about?
Yeah.
Well, Duncan, go ahead. You want to try it?
Well, first of all, you have to know where the off button is. Second of all, you have to know who created this and what are they selling. You know, I mean, I get this all the stuff, all this time, all the stuff where people say, well, the American people, blah, blah, blah. And I say, you know, there are people spending multi-billions of dollars every year to convince people of this stuff. They don't come about this naturally. These opinions of Trumpies, this is not a natural phenomena. They're, you know, Murdoch and crew, for example, are, you know, are making money selling stuff, and somebody's paying Murdoch and company money. Or even, you know, even on all sides. This is true on all sides. So the first thing is know, how is it created? Who created it? Why did they create it? And do I really need to be watching this stuff? You know, if you find your blood getting boiled, you really need to ask a person, anybody needs to ask themselves the question, do I need to do this? Do I need to participate in this? Is this really beneficial to me? Is it beneficial to the world? I mean, you know, many of the people, even anti-Trump people, you know, get their blood boiling and get all and the question is, well, I mean, if you're angry at Trump and his followers, is that actually improving the situation?
Right.
I don't have an answer for that. The answer, you know, really depends on who's being asked the question. But I can guarantee you, I know a number of people where I would just say to them, you know what? You want to make a better contribution to the world? Turn off the news. Go for a walk. Feed your dog. Take care of your children. Paint a picture. Sit on the porch. And you'll be making a contribution that's 100-fold better than you consuming media and then getting upset about it and then posting some rash reaction. You know, if you cannot suspend judgment, and it's very difficult if you don't know who's creating what you're reacting to and why. If you cannot suspend judgment, that's a good sign that you should not be consuming whatever you're consuming. You know, Gerry's been involved in movies for many, many years. He knows a lot about them. I have a friend in Italy who's been involved in movies for many, many years. It's important to know how movies are made. You know, like I'm not a horror movie fan. My mother thought my sensibilities were too tender and didn't let me watch horror movies. And I still don't like them. But I heard of a really nice technique if I ever have to go with my girlfriend to a new horror movie because she wants to go. He said, take a photograph of the main actors to the movie with you. And when you're watching the movie, look at their photograph every once in a while. Okay. This is a case where this is a technique for suspending judgment about a horror movie. Okay. So I'll stop there.
That was good, Duncan. Oh, I got a echo. Can you hear it?
Yeah, I'm enjoying this fact that over my image is Rob's book and has probably wrong right at the top of my head.
Yeah, I still hear the echo, Rob. Do you hear it? Anyways, I'll just talk.
I think it might be, I just muted us, and it might be on Duncan's end if the speakers are too loud, but
Okay.
we'll work.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. Well,
I didn't hear it. So let me react.
All right, I turned it down. I turned it down a good 20 points. So let's see what that does.
I don't hear an echo now, and that was beautiful, Duncan. It was so well put. And look at you laid out strategies, which are called, pattern recognition leads to comprehensive awareness. He gave you steps. He said the first one, turn it off. That's called fasting. Duncan, that was a great initial thing. If this is raising your blood, fast from it. You can turn it off. You can go back to it. You can psychoanalyze it, talk to someone about it. The next three were amazing. Who created it? Why they created it? And do I need this? Again, that's asking questions. And really well put with the horror film thing, because I am of the exact same way. I do not want to watch horror films, and I'm sure horror films have a function in storytelling, but we can pick and choose. So I've sort of fasted from horror films. I've shown them, and they've been effective. I bought a 16 millimeter copy of Night of the Living Dead, showed it to college campus for 8 years, made money so we could show rare foreign films, and know how that film will scare the shit out of people. And there's not really a lot going on that's really that horrible. It's all about the editing and how they put it together. But George Romero did a hell of a job making a scary film. And so all the power to him. It's not the genre I like Duncan. But what you touched on, Rob, was so important is Goebbels, appealing to the emotion of people. Well, that's what the symbolist poets got from Edgar Allan Poe.
Right.
Is effects precede causes. Don't worry about what you're actually saying. It's how do you want the person who's consuming your art to feel? So, you go to that. The guy who did all this, helped blossom it all, is a horror writer. I mean, basically, I'm not a big
Edgar Allan Poe, yeah.
I'm not a big reader of Poe, but I know what he helped invent, which is the detective novel, which I'm only going to give you a little information, and then you're going to go, oh, I know what's going to happen. So it swoops you in. And so, like, if you go to a horror film in the ghetto, they yell at the screen, they go, don't open that door. I mean, that's the ultimate in cinema, where the people yell at the screen. That's live cinema at its best. They actually go, don't open that. I know there's something behind it. So this is emotion. And so then how do we cope with the emotion? You go, Rob says, my blood's boiling because I'm watching these people do this in the world today. Well, then that's called sensory. So we go to that question that you astutely asked in your email prepping for this very Zoom, is you misspelled the word percept and you put it precept. Now, I've had a professional book me at a big film festival once, and she did the exact same thing. She changed the word. So guess what that made me do? This is when you have a breakdown, how do you flip it into a breakthrough? So I says, okay, I'm going to go to etymology. I'm going to find out what precept means, what percept means, and what concept means. Now, overall, concept is head, thinking. Percept is heart, intuition, impulse. So I was like, well, what is precept? Because people always want to flip the R and the E. They just think they don't know the word percept. I know the word precept. I think Gerry got it wrong. He meant precept. Okay, here's what precept means. Command, direction. It's from Latin, maxim, rule of conduct. It comes from grasping. In the etymology for the precept, for the word precept, it says from Old French word percept. I goes, oh no, that really messed me up. But we know that percept comes more so from perception,
Right.
but it's not until 1837 did percept come along, and it means the immediate object in perception. So that's like
It's the figure.
Say it again, Duncan.
That's the figure.
That's the figure. And here's the thing. This is going back to poetry. One of America's greats, Allen Ginsberg, came out of the Eastern philosophy, said first thought, best thought. So when we're doing tetrad management, which is a strategy to cope with this what you're going through, Rob, when you get all fired up watching the news, just do a tetrad on the tool, and you think, how do you do tetrads? You go first thought, best thought. Just throw out your first feeling. Don't think about it, but you're not going to be able to separate thinking from you can't separate your head from your heart. You think you can, but we do because we made up the two words, but literally you can't. So to perceive something, now you take percept into its root. That percept is a noun. You put it in the verb form, perceive is to know by direct experience.
Perceive is to know by direct experience.
A direct experience. That's what they say the root of the word means. It's developed. So it means to notice, to see. They use it as a sense of sight, to recognize, to understand, and it's back to precept, to grasp. So they're all of them, precept and percept are a tactile thing. Oh, I get your idea. I grasp your idea. It's just that I would say precept is a little more leaning towards a command or a direction, whereas percept is a little more leaning towards impulse. And the word I use more so is percept, as opposed to concept. Just to finish, concept is funny too, because where the word came from, it means a general notion formed in the mind. So that's it. Conceit. That's where concept comes from, is conceit. Like you think you know something, you're thinking. But there's a fine line. If you go, well, I have a hunch that this news show is probably not going to be healthy for me to watch with my little daughter on my lap. So that's you're using your brain and your heart at the same time. But this is the difference in suspended judgment is, in my opinion, is you lean, and Duncan brought this up in our meeting earlier today. I don't want to demonize concept or say it's bad, but I want us to operate more on a perceptual level. Right. But we do have concepts. We all decided to do this Zoom, and we've been here for 23 minutes. That's a concept. And there's words coming out of our mouth. Go ahead, Duncan. Yeah.
Well, for a person in American society, and probably Western society in general, and maybe all societies, to think that we can directly perceive is a concept.
Exactly.
Because we are trained from very early age to have a point of view. So when you look at things, I'll include myself, when we look at things, we're not seeing the things. It takes time to learn how to see the things. And that's, I think, the basis of this whole business of sitting down. I mean, in Zen and the various Buddhist disciplines, the idea is to sit down and to watch your thoughts. But basically, that's just a technique for letting your thoughts go away. We got these tapes. We've all learned these tapes. It's different tapes for different people. But when you sit down and you're looking at something, it's guaranteed the tapes will start rolling. And they're going to roll as long as necessary to run out of tape. And certainly for a person who's new to this practice, if you get out of, say, a 10 or 15-minute period, if you end up with 15 seconds of unadulterated percept, you're doing great. And this is where the thing about learning to turn off the media is important, because most of us these days, we replenish our tapes by watching media.
Oh. We don't let our spools run dry. We just keep adding to the reel.
There's a whole industry dedicated to replenishing your tapes in the manner that they want the tapes replenished.
Yeah.
I mean, look at it's wonderful. If I go and I look for something on Google, for example, and I spend a little time looking at it, I guarantee you, days and weeks after, this keeps on repeating in my feeds of various sorts. It shows up in my Gmail. It shows up in my Facebook. It shows up on my Twitter feed. They're replenishing the tapes. They're saying, hey, Duncan, don't you remember? You looked at this book, man. You sure you don't want to go buy this book right now? They're trying to make money off of replenishing my tapes. So if I were to sit down and start meditating, I guarantee you that book or that general topic is going to come up in my mind.
It's called Create the Disease and Offer the Cure. It's really back to what Poe invented and helped invent and spawn the symbolist. I'm going to help you feel anxious. So I'm going to create that feeling. And then you're going to come back to me because you like having that feeling. And then, say it again, Duncan.
Because I have given you a strong emotion and your life is pretty tasteless. So come back for this next horror movie so you can actually feel something. Right. I mean, this is where sexual perversion comes from.
Yeah.
They teach you not to feel. And then they teach you to have great sex.
Yeah.
That's a contradiction. That's why a lot of people.
Who taught us how to have great sex? I remember going to my first
No, they don't teach you. They don't teach you how to have great sex. They tell you should be having great sex, and they leave it very undefined.
Yeah.
And then okay, if we want to go there, and so many people, when they go and they have sex and they say, well, that was pretty good, so there's got to be more than that, and then 50 Shades of Grey come out. Oh my God, that must be the problem. I'm being too tame.
Yeah.
It's not that I can't feel anything or I barely feel anything. That can't be it. I need someone to whip me
Yeah.
because I don't have, my senses are so dulled that I can't feel subtleties. All right. So anyway, that's another soapbox of mine.
I think
Duncan, that was brilliant because we did a tetrad on argument today. And the fourth step is what does argument flip into when pressed to an extreme? And Jay said a hug. And other people said, fist fight. So that was a great realm. One major thing on this whole suspended judgment is Pascal, who was a mathematics guy and the philosopher. And he said
Mm-hmm.
this major thing that McLuhan got from him, in order to understand anything, you have to know this end of the spectrum and that end and everything in between. So it's hard to know the big picture. So Duncan's bringing up, 50 Shades. People didn't know about this. And they go, wow, this is a pop book. I can read about what they do. And I know that a simple hug can be good. And maybe somebody hitting me when I'm coming could be good. And now I know there's this range. But it doesn't mean you have to, be sold either one. We
Yeah,
we
but
we grow up hugging and we realize two of my favorite answers ever to my question, what's the best thing for a human being? Craig Baldwin said, human touch. And Ann Magnuson said, a hug. We don't think of that as information, but touching another human being or hugging them is a form of information according to them. So
yeah,
that's
right. Okay.
amazing. Yeah, go ahead, Duncan.
Well, you have to remember, I'm going to bring in Wilhelm Reich here. And, if you study Reich, Rob, are you familiar with Wilhelm Reich?
no, I've heard the name. Do you mind?
Well, he was basically a socialist, psychoanalyst who got into sexual liberation, and he said you can pretty much tell where people are at by what their orgasms are like. And anyway, he ended up getting himself a hell of a lot of trouble. The communists didn't like him. He
You
came to the
don't
United
say.
States. Yeah, but I think his essential point was a good one.
Hmm.
The hug is good if you can feel the hug. The problem is that, and even today in this time of so-called sexual liberation, most people are what's called armored.
Yes.
They have muscular tension in their body. Like my mother was a really good example. My mother loved me a lot, but even though she loved me a lot, if I went to give her a hug, she became as responsive as a piece of wood.
Perhaps because she knew how to. Go
Well, she
ahead.
just
Sorry.
didn't know how to relax. She didn't know how to receive.
I'm just going to interject for a sec. There's this kind of archetype of the person who can give love but cannot receive it throughout time. Like, the person who could save the world but couldn't save themselves. They can give people love and show them love, but they can't receive it. Like, I know in my own experiences, my wife and I, we'll get into an argument and then she'll try and hug me. And it's like, I need space. And it's almost like I'm so armored that I'm like that. Or, take out the news for a sec. But if somebody's like, you shouldn't feel that way and you need to be a man. And whenever that happens, I'm like, what the fuck did you just say? You know what I mean? Right? So that's the Hellraiser, like the thing that comes out of its head. Right?
Right,
I hear these words,
relax?
and they're triggers, and yeah, that's what they say. Like, Jesus, calm down, and it's like, Anyways, that's where my sort of part of suspension of judgment comes in, is when it's our lived experiences and we're so armored because we've been hurt in our lives, right? And that this hurt is being reflected in our You know, like you're right. I just need to turn off the media. But then there comes a point when it is something that's being evoked so deeply within us that it hurts us, that's where it's like, how do we suspend our judgment? How do we not react to this?
Take
And
notes.
yeah, you know what? Here's the other thing too, is we are animals, right? We are strange creatures. And if you put any animal in a weird fucking society like this one, that's largely artificial as we do the whole McLuhan thing, we're like, wait a minute, we're just out of the cave. You're going to have adverse experiences. It's like Rat Park. You know, if you give the rat cocaine and that's it in this shitty little cell, it's going to be a cokehead all day, baby. You know, give it a 1988 white Mercedes Benz, it's going to love it. But if you give it like a park to jump around and play on and do things and explore itself in a community,
Right.
it's going to do that. It's not going to choose the cocaine.
Yeah, the cocaine will go. They'll just sit there.
It's like, man, I'd rather like do parkour. But then it's like you put ourselves in this society that I really think, going back to this reel of, it just wants us to get revved up. It wants us to have a reaction so that the wheel can keep spinning in the kind of consumerist milieu or whatever, right? We have to keep buying. We need our materials. You know, I need my California king size bed because, you know, my other bed is too comfy, right? Anyways, so we have this, and then we have a reaction. We get all pissed off. We punch the steering wheel. We give the guy the flip the bird, and then we shame ourselves afterwards. We're like, oh, you know, instead of just saying, man, I'm in a really weird experiment, and because I'm in such a strange experiment, it's going to come to be that I'm going to have a reaction. So I have to learn from it rather than further, because it's like if you're trying to quit smoking and then you have a cigarette and then you beat yourself up. So you're like, oh, what's the point? So then you keep smoking versus I had a setback. How do I turn my breakdowns into breakthroughs? But it's like in our society, it seems, this is a value judgment, you know, sorry guys, but it seems that it's like, I want to turn my breakdown into a further breakdown. Why? Because it feels good, right?
But
it seems that way.
Rob,
yeah,
hold on.
Go ahead.
This is brilliant, because you don't take all these cliches and formulas and aphorisms like McLuhan spouting them and take them literally and do them. He was constantly saying, reinvent the aphorism.
Right.
So a lot of people go, I've heard that breakdown into breakthrough, but you know, these people have been with me for 10, 20 years. I've heard that a million times. Quit saying that. Like, you know, Robbie.
What does it mean?
Robbie Dude does that all the time. He says that anyone who seeks the truth, you know, as soon as they found it, they, he says, I hate to hear that again. Now that's a cliche, but that is in itself a breakdown. Just to go back to Duncan's brilliant point about Wilhelm Reich. Wilhelm Reich was like Tesla. They're brilliant thinkers who are a little outside the norm, and then the U.S. government like kills them and throws them in jail and suppresses them. And then years later, we flip them. We flip their percepts. And Justin Makabayev made the film WR, Mysteries of the Organism, which is a brilliant film. And it helps it makes more accessible Wilhelm Reich to the normal person. Duncan probably actually read Wilhelm Reich because he was able to be read and understood it. I learned it through a movie, but it's not that I know it deep. So when you have one thing is you don't have to apologize. Jay does that all the time. He says, well, I'm making a value judgment. Sorry. You don't have to apologize. What you're doing is saying, this is part of the process. We're all going to say, I'll say at the beginning of the meeting, okay, try to refrain from value judgments. And then people go, sorry, I'm making value judgment. You don't have to be sorry. You're processing and navigating how you make a value judgment, and then you move on to the next step. It's going to reinvent a new percept, or I'm going to help me reimagine a new question or a new strategy or a new metaphor. But it's not like you're doing something wrong, because we don't know if we are hardwired for a point of view or not. But earlier today, just that, as soon as we invented printing press, it started making us have a point of view. And then Michael said it great. He said, the painters were doing the vanishing point. This is the most bullshitty thing that McLuhan's ever said, but I think it's true. When painters go and make a vanishing point in a painting, that was us starting to form a point of view. So it's metaphorical. A lot of what McLuhan's saying is poetic and metaphorical, but he's saying it in an academic, I'm a media theorist way. He's not. Right. He teased people to believe his percepts were concepts. So, but he doesn't, he knows he's an academic, but he's like, hey man, I got a Woody Allen film. I can joke around. And people go, well, you're a bullshit artist then. You're not really an academic, And so that's why all these great people are pseudo McLuhanites now. They teach in Switzerland to all the rich kids, and they're all like performance artists, DJ Spooky and Kavisa. They're great artists, but they're flipping it. So it's a constant process of knowing that you have a point of view, but you're going to flip it. And the one last thing, sorry to go on and on, but one thing I learned early on is you can go ahead and have your point of view when you're alone. I hate Facebook. I love Facebook. But when you're with one or more people, you don't really have to say that. You go, how did Facebook affect your children and how does it affect your grandparents? And you're not saying I love it, because McLuhan didn't really like TV, but he's known as the godhead of TV. So, it's not really you have to apologize, and it is human to do this. We're really talking about human behavior, just humanness.
Yes.
So may I go back for just a second? Okay, so Rob, you brought up the argument and the feelings, the reactions to argument. And I said, take notes. That was not a joke. That was actually an instruction. Because during an argument, you're never going to reform yourself during an argument. It's just not possible. I mean, it's just not possible. But if you make some sort of note and you review and you go back, what the fuck was that about? Why did I blow up about that? Yeah, she or he did something stupid or mean or whatever. But why did I react to that? I'm a big boy. Why couldn't I just turn around and say, look, darling, go take a nap. You're obviously, it's time to take a nap. Which is actually, it's actually like with my children, whenever they would go crazy, I'd always say, did you take a nap today? Are you hungry? Did something happen at school? What, because half the time, let's say the classic thing, when couples have an argument, the other person in the couple is not the actual reason for the argument. It's because the boss or the supervisor or someone in the class did something really shitty, but you can't slap the little fucker down because you're a professional.
Yeah.
So instead, you store up the energy, you go home, your spouse says something pretty innocuous, really, and then you go,
yeah. What's the antecedent, right? Is that what? Like, what's going on in the behind the scenes leading up to this?
What has built up the physical and mental tension that needs to be released? I really strongly advise, and we may have talked about this before, get Robert Sapolsky's book or look at his TED Talk called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Okay? Well worth it. I'll give you
summarize it. What does it basically
summarize is, okay, so I'm a zebra. I'm out in the prairie with my other zebras. Lion comes. Yeah. I run like hell. The lion maybe or doesn't, get one of the other members of my herd. But I realized, oh, the lion's gone. He's either eating one of my herds people, or we outran him. And I shake off all of that tension.
Cortisol.
Well, yeah, well, but we're not allowed to do that. Plus the fact it's lions all the fucking time.
Dude, that's a book title right there.
Yeah, it's lions all the time. The tax man, the utility bills, the college course that needs to be passed, whatever. It's lions all the fucking time. And we don't have a chance to relax under normal circumstances. We have to learn. We have to become conscious of, why is this happening? Why is it that I have a fight with my spouse every Thursday afternoon when I come home? What's actually happening in my life that sets up the tension for this, or what's happening in her life or his life, depending upon, all that stuff. So this is almost, in a sense, this is the whole thing of taking the photographs of the main actors in the horror movie out and looking at them. It's the same, there's a parallelism here. So, this is the irony, is that without analyzing, we're not going to get back to percepts. We're not going to get back to truly understanding our percepts, because we're going to be putting this layer of tension between us and reality. And you can go read the literature. The literature almost always says we don't see things directly. The Oriental philosophy is saying, well, yeah, that's true, but you can. Or you can do it better. But you got to turn things off, and, you got to let the tapes run out. And then, you'll make some progress. And really, once a person actually understands the mechanism, then you find, oh yeah, okay, I can feel it. Turn it off. Let the tapes run. And you can let the tapes run while you're lying down, taking a nap. And then look at how incredibly beautiful and magical the world we live in really is. And yeah, we're going to die, and, we're going to get old and die and all that stuff. But if you actually can see the beauty and the majesty and the magic of the world, it's kind of like, you know what? It's okay. I'm fucking lucky. A lot of molecules never get here. I'm this amazing collection of molecules that get to, play. And yeah, sometimes I get a shitty roll, but that's mainly because I do that to myself, because I'm ignorant. But once I become a little less ignorant, I realize, you know what? I'm an amazing temporary collection of molecules that functions as a unit. And, I'm my mind, the real mind, not the thinking mind, the real mind, the awareness mind, is going to go, at some point, is going to go back into the fertility of the universe and going to pop up in different forms.
Yeah, Duncan, you called me your mentor earlier. You're my mentor, and so is Rob, because
me too, man.
That's joyous. The joyous attitude there is sort of your attitude in your overall knowledge and wisdom that there is a hidden psychic effect. There is a deep, we can be deep sea divers and go deeper. And we can surface and surf. We can be on the surface. And I always go, well, let's get a little deeper. It doesn't mean that the surface stuff isn't important to reflect on too, that we can think about these deeper levels too and go, maybe you blow up every Wednesday because you come home hungry and you try to suss that out. There was a
Right, you had
line.
extra classes that day, and you
Yeah,
can't stop, and you didn't eat any breakfast in the morning to begin with.
yeah. And it is like attitude in when Rob said, let's do a session on suspended judgment. So, of course, I just Googled suspended judgment in McLuhan, and there it went into all this Alfred Whitehead stuff, and he got it from Bertrand Russell. Bertrand Russell is who Whitehead got suspended judgment from, and then pass it on to McLuhan, and it comes back from just being, in the zone of yin and yang from Eastern philosophies, I think. But the one line that came up was, we can discover anything we decide to discover. That's like pretty simple. I always go back to one of my mentors was also Burt Lancaster in the film Birdman of Alcatraz. He's in jail, but he still learns to have fun because the birds fly in through his cell, and has a love of nature and, nurturing these birds. I goes, it doesn't matter if you're in jail, you could be anywhere and have fun. And yeah, go ahead, Duncan.
I told you earlier about this guy, this French guy. I'll send you the name of his book later, but basically he's blind, but he learned, it's a really good, I think it's called And Let There Be Light by Lucerman or something like that. Anyway, he and another fellow, Jack Swartz, I'm not entirely sure about the Jack Swartz problem, but they actually learned to benefit when they were being beaten up by the SS.
Yeah.
And they were actually able to see how fucked up the SS people were, and that they were the ones who needed sympathy and understanding. They were so fucked up, because you have to be pretty fucked up to be able to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Dehumanize.
But, I'm nowhere near that stage. I'm only at the state where I can turn off the media every once in a while and read some poems.
Well, have you guys ever read Soren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher?
Yeah.
And his Sickness Unto Death. And this was written, I don't know, in the 19th century. And he's talking about despair and distractibility. And I heard about this when I was in like grade 12. So it's one of those like, what the fuck was that just went over my head? I want to party. Anyways, so years later, looking back now, Soren Kierkegaard is talking about how we distract ourselves from facing ourselves. And that's that sickness unto death. That's despair. But then you go back to always extending the real. And it's like, like I'm becoming so wary of these messages that are constantly being flung at me. And it's like, yeah, I just need to turn it off, sit down and realize, maybe I didn't get enough hugs as a kid or whatever. And it's like, hey, I can correct that. But why don't I look within rather than trying to find what aggravates me from without?
Yeah, because they're spending billions of dollars.
Yeah.
To get you.
They want you to be
entertaining.
Until it isn't.
I realized years ago that I'm privileged in the sense that I've had enough to realize that enough is pretty empty. But if you take someone, for example, if you have people who's coming to this country from some war-torn, very poor country, and they come, or they're living in a war-torn, very poor country, and they're seeing the American life on television. You know, this is a magic land from their point of view. This is the Golden Kingdom.
Yeah.
And the television and the computer and all this stuff. This is magic stuff. They don't have the photographs to look at when they're looking at the movie to realize this is a fucking movie. They actually don't know there's a man behind the curtain.
Wizard of Oz.
And it's a show. And the guy who's putting on the show is selling stuff.
Whoa.
But if you hang out in Western culture long enough, you begin to realize that, hey, there's something really weird going on here. And that's, I just happened to hit that period of history when I and some other people realized there's something really weird going on here. My parents aren't happy. All this stuff is supposed to be great. I'm supposed to be living in the greatest country of the world, even though I have to do the duck and cover drills because we might be dropping bombs on ourselves. And then I go to school and then I university and I realize, oh my God, the air is pretty fucked up, really. And we got a river burning up in Ohio, a major river burning up Ohio. And if you look around Bayonne, New Jersey, it stinks. It's ugly. And it's right very close to New York City, and New York City is supposed to be that, but don't look in the corners of New York City. Stick on Broadway, stick on Times Square. Don't go to the ghetto.
Don't go to what you don't want to see.
Don't go to the sweatshops. Well, I mean, any healthy human being at a certain point will begin to go, I want to see what's on the other side of the road there. Okay.
One of my favorite movies of all time is The Lion King. I've made this reference many times, but there's a scene, Mufasa and Simba, and they're looking at, their kingdom. And Mufasa's like, everything the light touches is our kingdom. And what does Simba say? He says, what's that shadowy place over there? That is a place that you must never go to. What's the next scene? What does he do? He goes to the place.
Yeah, of course.
Right? So, Mufasa, being the wise father that he is, he should have known this. And I think in many regards, Lion King's such a wonderful film to me is that it exists beyond it's real. Like I think about what characters were doing outside of scenes. I've created a universe within this film. And anyways, in watching this, I think to myself, Mufasa as a father, as he's walking Simba home, he must have realized, damn it, this is my fault. And I've heard about Buddhism and that, all things shall pass, the good, the bad, the ugly, the otherwise. And nothing has so beautifully articulated that to me than being a parent. Like I look at my daughter and every day she's a new person. She's growing old. I mean, she peed on the toilet yesterday. I've never cried over somebody peeing. Right? I was crying tears of like joy and sadness over somebody taking a piss. I never thought that would ever happen. Right? I'm like, this is really weird. I don't know I don't know what's wrong with me. But anyways, but knowing that one day, and then I played a song and it's like by Tim McGraw, My Baby Girl, and it's all about go on, take on the world, blah, blah, blah. But in my head, I was crying because I'm thinking of one day, she's going to be a woman and she's going to have her own family. And it's like, it happened like that. And that's why, I think it's getting a lot easier for me to turn off the media because I'm able, this is life happening right now. Right. And it's the most beautiful thing to me, but damn, it's tragic. And we add these values of beautiful, tragic, ugly. It's just life. It's the Tao. It is what it is.
It's
Yeah,
you,
well, I
you
will tell you.
go ahead, Doug.
Well, I will tell you that um, I'm getting older.
Mhm.
I have grandchildren. There's a lot of problems in the world, and specifically in the United States right now. And that has, shall we say, had a hand in guiding me into a more productive, and some might say more serious path. Because I look and I say, well, in truth, what is the best thing that I could bequeath my grandchildren? Assuming that they will even accept it, because everybody knows of cases where the children and grandchildren are in a different planet altogether.
Right.
But I figure, well, if I can get closer to life and the flow of life, and in some way pass at least a little bit of that on to my grandchildren, that'd be great.
Yeah, Duncan, it's wonderful how you reference books so often, and Rob does too. So we just have that generation, and you've talked about how you hope your children and your grandchildren will take into account this amazing library you've acquired, and you actually use it. And to go back to that pollution thing, just think in 1962 when Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring, and with a simple book she raised our awareness on how we treat Mother Nature. And
Mm-hmm.
so we can transcend these limitations through books, through suspended judgment, through inventing new questions and new metaphors. And, in 1972, one of the most important McLuhan books was called Take Today, the Executive as Dropout. It's such a funny title because it's like, are we
Mm-hmm.
dropouts? Are we hanging out with Rob in a show called I'm Probably Wrong About Everything because we're dropouts? Yeah, look at that. Look at that telephone. It is a fun book. It's an unreadable book, but
Well, it's a book you have to read the way you would drink fine, expensive wine.
very good.
So
That's
you
a
Little
chug
bit
it.
at a time. A little bit at a time.
a little bit at a time, and he has some great Finnegan's Wake references. But here's the to go full circle on our theme today was suspended judgment. In that book he said suspended judgment is indispensable to the programming of total environments. So again, it's like when we invent these things, information overload, news, media, whatever we're inventing, cell phones, pencils, diapers,
Mm-hmm.
it creates environments. So we can program those environments. We can address the environment and not hate cell phones and not hate
Right.
diapers or not hate bulldozers. We can say, what is the environment it creates and address the environment, because these inventions are not going to go away, but they're going to just have a new invention next week that's a little better, or they claim it's better. And so then you flip to George Orwell responding to Finnegan's Wake. So this comes out in 1939, and we were so happy because
Mm-hmm.
Rob sat in.
Quite a period in history,
Yeah,
1939.
and we were so happy because Rob finally sat in a Finnegan's Wake reading club, and so that was
Mm-hmm.
great. And we hope you return and get it. So this is 1939. The book comes out 1944. George Orwell says of Finnegan's Wake, one can suspend its judgment on Finnegan's Wake because in 15 years it will either be intelligible or forgotten. Now that's a great statement coming from George Orwell, because
Yeah, he
it was,
suspended judgment.
yeah, he's using the word suspended judgment, but he's also saying it's either going to be
Either this
intelligible
or
or
that.
forgotten. And the beauty is it's both. It is intelligible to us who read it a little out loud with a group of people, and it's forgotten by hundreds of Joyceans and hundreds of literature people who discount it. But it's both. It's not one or the other. So again, it's that big picture view of, you know, going back to, if we understand that Finnegan's Wake is a human invention, it has services and disservices, and trying to understand its hidden psychic effects. Go ahead,
Right.
Rob.
There's an ecology of everything. Slipknot,
Yeah.
a band that you wouldn't often attribute to being beautiful and
Oh
poetic,
no, there are
says,
guys.
right, says you cannot kill what you did not create.
Yeah.
And I think it's Before I Forget. You hear that song, you're like, yeah, my parents don't understand me or whatever. But it's true. It's like there is an ecology of everything. And it's like we
Wait,
can
is
try
that
and,
the name of the song?
no, the song is called Before I Forget. But I'm just saying there
But
is an
where'd you get
ecology
the
of it.
term ecology of everything from?
I'm just reading all this stuff.
You cannot kill what you
What you have created.
You cannot kill what you did not create. That's the lyric from the song.
Well, Slipknot's drummer just died, right?
Yes.
Two of their guys have died.
Yes. That and
In
Paul
there, you
Gray.
know what? They're basically
Duality. The song is called Duality.
okay. They're basically, as far as I know, they're rich art kids from Iowa.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're a performance artist who goes, dude, I'm not going to make any money being a performance artist. I'm going to be a heavy metal rocker. And it's sort of sad because they probably both were subsumed by drugs. You think both of them died of drugs?
Well, yeah. And
Yeah.
and the reality is that
because you understand ecology of everything. I'd really like to know where that came from. I want to suss that out, because here's the word ecology. McLuhan sort of invented media ecology, saying we're living organisms, and ecology is our relationship with our environment. That's what an organism's relationship with its environment is ecology. Most people think ecology is save the whales, but it applies to everything, you know.
but this is a suspended judgment. This is what the ecology of everything is if we can suspend our judgment, we can start to see the intercorrelations and interconnectedness of everything, even if it's only just through symbolism, which is what Whitehead was talking about. He was talking about that there is, at the very least, a symbolic connection. It's like, that's why I can read, these books or any book or whatever, and then I'm making, based on my a priori knowledge, the connections to it. It's like when I watch Mufasa and then Lion King, whatever. It's when I watch something and then all the stuff that's happened before, I'm integrating that into what I'm seeing in my point of view.
Boy, Duncan, we're in trouble now. We got the host of I'm probably wrong about everything. We brainwashed him. Now he's quoting Alfred Whitehead to us.
That's great. That's great. I need some
only because I just read it. Only because I just read it.
But that was good. But Duncan, you were going to say something. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I have what's a really good example of why at a certain level you need to suspend judgment. You and I have a little bit of different interpretation about this. I say you need to suspend judgment when you're analyzing and gathering information. But there's no reason to permanently, or even for a long period of time, to get rid of point of view. Okay, so this whole thing, I think, is brilliantly illustrated by Milton Erickson, which I know Gerry has heard me reference probably at least 50 times so far. Milton Erickson, for those who don't know, was considered one of the most brilliant and beneficial hypnotherapists ever in America. He was out of Arizona, and he had influence on Gregory Bateson and the NLP people and lots of other people. when he treated people, and he had some really messed up people come to him. At some point, when he would put them under hypnosis and he would make suggestions that they may want to approach things a little bit different, he would always say, but don't forget that behavior which you came to me to get rid of, you don't want to get rid of it, because it was a very useful tool which helped you to survive to this point, and you may need it sometime in the future. So don't try to get rid of it. Just tuck it away.
That's why it's called anger management, not anger removal.
Exactly. Just tuck it away, and should there be a time in the future when you need that particular instrument again, bring it out and use it.
Right.
Okay. There's also
managing the utility.
Yeah, Heinrich Zimmer, who also wrote a series of stories. I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, he had a thing about. I'll save that for another time. But it's this glorious tale about an Arab merchant who was known as a miser, but everybody shamed him so much about his shoes that he tried to throw his old ratty shoes, which he had been wearing forever, away. But somehow, every time he threw the shoes away, it would cause him trouble, until he learned that you don't throw those things away. You put them in the back of the closet so you know where they are.
Right.
Duncan, that was brilliant. Were you done? Go ahead.
I'm pretty much done. I think that this is the whole thing about suspending judgment is it's learning whatever you're judging, what was it actually useful? This is the first tetrad, what are the benefits of it?
Yeah.
But also learning the other aspects of it so you know when and when not to use it.
Yeah, no, that was so brilliant, because there's two things that resonate with me. One is, I think it's Ray Charles says, the blues is a black man walking down the street and he has one shoe in his hand. And the white man comes up to him. He says, dude, did you lose a shoe? And the black man goes, no, I found one. Because we think the blues is bad. He's like, no, man, I found a shoe. And what you said is exactly, it's in the trailer for my film, but it's one of the most beautiful moments in my film, where we talk to people on the Venice boardwalk and we just interview them randomly. And we say, tell me something good you never had and you never want, which is a question we got through NLP, which is Milton Erickson, big influence. And this guy goes, well, a dysfunctional family. It's good. I never had it. I never want it. Or no, I'm sorry. I erased that. It was, what's the best thing for a human being? He said a dysfunctional family was the best thing for me. And this homeless guy on the street says, I wouldn't be who I am unless I was raised in a dysfunctional family. I've learned how to deal with it, but I don't want to get rid of that. I know that's part of me, and I have to cope with it, deal with it, analyze it, turn it off sometimes, reflect on it, and utilize it as part of knowing that's who made me. My dysfunctional family made me who I am. So I can't just turn away from that and run. It's what Erickson said is amazing. Don't forget to get rid of,
Don't get totally rid of it. Keep it handy in case you need it again.
Because if you get rid of it, it becomes Brave New World. Aldous Huxley. No, for real.
Yeah.
That's why that was a brilliant book. Nobody's upset. Nobody's bad. Nobody's jealous.
Yeah.
They just get high on soma.
I'll tell you, I apologized to my son the other day that I was not an alcoholic.
Beautiful.
And the reason I apologized to him, I mean, he's actually pretty solid, but he knows that he could have a tendency to drink too much. And I told him, I said, the only reason that I probably do not drink heavily is because my father, my mother's father, and my mother's brother were alcoholics.
Right.
And so I've got all these images. Now, I could be in despair and say, oh God, I wish my father had been perfect, blah, blah, blah. But in this particular case, it's a good thing. And so I have to try to pass that knowledge on to him verbally. And I think he's taken it to heart. He's pretty solid, like I say, though he does have a taste for expensive whiskey. But I've always thought that the people to really feel sorry for are the people who are born with money, good looks, and charm. And if they're famous on top of that, then they're really in trouble. because with the exception of maybe one of us, probably no one's ever going to be straight with them.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And I always say
they are on their own.
Yeah, we call them trustafarians, and I always say it's not their fault. They were born into that.
Trustafarians.
So yeah.
Well, Robin Williams said it's the worst thing in the world is to be in a room full of people that make you feel like you're alone.
Yeah. Who said that?
Robin Williams.
Oh, did he? Yeah.
Right? Makes you wonder.
Well,
sometimes everything you want is just none of what you need.
No, you can't become conscious if you have everything you want, particularly if you're born with it. You've heard the joke with Joseph Heller and Kurt Vonnegut going to a party in the Hamptons?
No.
Tell us.
Okay, so Joseph Heller, Catch-22, and Kurt Vonnegut of all of his fabulous satires. And they go to a party in the Hamptons in a mansion. And, they're there with all these people drinking very expensive alcohol out of very expensive containers and looking at people dressed in probably clothes that is their entire budget for the year for clothes. And I believe it was Vonnegut goes over to Joe Heller and he says, Joe, how do you feel being in a room with people this fabulously wealthy? And Joseph Heller says, I feel okay. He says, I've got the one thing that these people don't have. And Vonnegut said, really? And what's that? And Heller leans over to Vonnegut and he says, I know the meaning of enough.
Wow. Beautiful. That's sussing out the big picture, definitely. Thank you, Duncan, and thank you, Rob. I think we could wrap it up now if you guys are okay.
What a way to wrap it up.
Yeah, what a way to wrap it up, because enough is enough. It's like I just want to
stick a fork in him. He's done.
I just wanted to say a couple little things that Marshall said that evolution is adapting to exploration. So, I want to thank you both, because we're evolving, but it's because we've adapted to exploring. And I appreciate these exploration times and Zooms with both of you. Because Mallarmé, the symbolist poet, said, to define is to kill, to suggest is to create. So it's constantly creating and transcending these limitations we have. So this is one of the main things Poe taught McLuhan, was the method of invention is simply to begin with the solution of the problem. That's effects precede causes. So, I appreciate you hosting this amazing show. I'm probably wrong about everything, Rob. Thank you so much. Thank you, Duncan.
Yeah, I've had a good time. I appreciate it, Rob.
Thank you, guys.
And these sessions really are important to me.
Yeah.
Well, they're important to me. I mean, without conversation, I think we can really get lost in the weeds of existence. And I've said it before that, when you're going in a certain direction, you never want to go there by yourself, right? Like, I've traveled by myself. Guess what I end up doing? I find people along the way, and I have the best time of my life then.
Yeah.
What's getting to the top of the mountain if you're just going to have a big dinner by yourself? That sounds shitty to me. I want to have a big table for all my friends, right? And in the process of doing this, I really have changed my own target, my own telos, my own understanding. And that's that adapting as we evolve. Adapting to exploration.
Yeah, evolution is adapting to exploration.
Yeah.
And let's give one shout out to Roger Steffens.
Hell yeah.
Who connected me and Rob, and the great Peter Quadrino, who connected me and Duncan. So all praise gathering people together.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. I want to let you know I love you guys.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
love you.
Thank you, Rob. You keep
All right.
Keep on keeping on.
We will.
We'll do this again sometime. Okay.
All right. Take care.